The San Antonio Spurs led this game by 29 points and lost it. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen because of one missed shot. Blowing the biggest lead in finals history takes a full team breakdown, and part of that breakdown is on the bench, the coaching staff. So let's do this fairly. How much of the Spurs Game 4 collapse falls on the decisions Mitch Johnson made down the stretch, and how much is just on the players? Let's break it down. Here's how we'll keep this honest. We'll look at 4 coaching decisions under the microscope. The failure to stop the run, the late game clock management, who the offense ran through at the end, and the rotation. Then, just as importantly, we'll separate what's actually on the coach from what's on the players. Because not everything in a collapse is a coaching failure, and pretending it is would be lazy. Let's start with the run. This is game is culture. If you like film and decisions broken down fairly instead of just rage bait, hit subscribe. We're chasing 1,000, it's free, and it helps a ton. Now the run that should have been stopped. Decision 1, no answer for the run. Here's the core number. The Spurs scored 76 points in the first half and just 30 in the second. The Knicks adjusted their defense, started pressuring the ball and chasing San Antonio off the three-point line, and the Spurs offense went completely static. The job of a coaching staff during a run like that is to find one thing that works. For an entire half, they never did. And this is the most legitimate coaching criticism of the night. When the lead started shrinking, you'd want to see a clear counter, a set play to get an easy bucket, a lineup that creates offense, something to stop the bleeding and quiet the crowd. Instead, the Spurs kept running the same actions that had stopped working. The Knicks kept feasting and the momentum snowballed. A timeout buys a few seconds. It doesn't fix a scheme that's been solved. Decision 2, the clock and the timeout. Down the stretch of a one-possession game, every empty trip is fatal. As late as the 9-minute mark of the fourth, a Wembanyama putback still had the Spurs in front. But in crunch time, the offense too often settled, holding the ball, hunting a hero shot late in the clock instead of attacking early to get a clean, game-sealing bucket. Settling for tough, contested looks when you're clinging to a lead is how leads disappear. And there's a real debate about a late no timeout decision. One camp says Mitch Johnson was right to let his team play in the flow rather than stop and let the Knicks set their defense. The other says a young team in that cauldron needed a designed play, not a freelance possession. I lean toward wanting the set play in that spot, but I'll be honest, this one is genuinely arguable and smart people land on both sides. Decision 3, who closes? Here's the uncomfortable one. The Spurs leaned on Wembanyama to close, and on this night, he was cold. He finished 9 of 25 from the field, just 36%, with a true shooting under 43. He's a generational talent and your first option every night. But when your star is clearly struggling and the offense has no flow, part of coaching is having a second and third option ready. The counter never really came. To be fair to the coach, this cuts both ways. You don't bench a top 3 MVP candidate in the finals because of a cold quarter, and nobody would have praised pulling the ball out of his hands. But the lack of a reliable secondary creator late, a clear go-to action for someone else when Wembanyama was swarmed, is a fair thing to question. Great closing offenses always have a plan B. The Spurs looked like they didn't. Decision 4, the rotation. The fourth question is the rotation, and here I want to be careful because I'm not going to invent specific substitutions that didn't happen. What's fair to say is this is one of the youngest teams to ever hold a finals lead this big deep into a long playoff run on tired legs. When the run came, the coaching staff needed to find the 5-man group that could just get one stop and one good possession. For a full half, they never found it. Whether that's the wrong personnel or the wrong matchups, the lineup that stabilizes a game is the staff's responsibility. And the dagger sequence shows the breakdown. Brunson got a floater to fall to give the Knicks the lead with about a minute and a half to go. Then, on a later possession, OG Anunoby cleaned up a miss with a putback, a second chance the Spurs couldn't prevent. Late game defensive discipline, boxing out, locating shooters is coached and drilled. In the biggest moments, that discipline slipped. Now, the fair side. Because blaming the coach for everything is too easy. Wembanyama missed 2 free throws late, and free throws are not coached in crunch time, they're just missed. The cold shooting from the whole roster after halftime is on the players who took the shots. And a 29-point lead evaporating is so rare that some of it is simply basketball variance. One team going supernova while the other goes ice cold at the worst possible time. There's also composure. Wembanyama picked up a flagrant foul in this series for catching Karl-Anthony Towns with an elbow, his 3rd flagrant of the playoffs. Emotional control in a tightening game is partly on the player. A coach can preach poise, but he can't play the minutes. So a chunk of this collapse lives with the guys on the floor, not the man drawing on the clipboard. So let's split it honestly. On the coaching side, the failure to adjust to the Knicks defense, the static late offense, and the missing plan B when Wembanyama struggled. On the players' side, the missed free throws, the cold shooting, the lapses in poise. The truth is, it's both. A collapse this big is never one person. But the parts that are coachable, the adjustments and the closing plan, are where the staff has to be better. And to his credit, Mitch Johnson didn't hide from it. Afterward, he said simply that his team didn't finish the job. That's the right tone. The Spurs are young, they're ahead of schedule, and a brutal night like this is often how young teams and young coaches learn to close. The question is whether the lessons show up 48 hours later, because there's no time to dwell on it. Put a rough number on it. If you're grading the collapse, I'd put it at maybe 40% coaching, 60% players. The staff has real, fixable problems, the adjustments and the closing plan. But the majority of a night where you shoot ice cold and miss free throws lands on the floor. That split matters because it means this is correctable. The Spurs aren't broken. They got outcoached in spots and out-executed in others. So what has to change for Game 5? A clear counter when the Knicks load up on Wembanyama, a designed closing play instead of a freelance possession, tighter box outs in the final minutes, and the willingness to ride whichever lineup is actually stopping the run, even if it's not the usual 5. Those are coachable. Get them right, and a team that just blew a historic lead can still win this series. So you tell me, was the Spurs Game 4 collapse mostly a coaching failure or mostly players missing shots they normally make? I land on it being both, with the fixable part sitting on the bench. Drop your verdict in the comments, coach or players, and let's argue it out. And if you want the fair breakdowns instead of the hot takes, subscribe and join the family.